Hi, today we're going to have a look at 2019 Leaving Cert higher level ratio question. As with all ratio questions, we are given this year's profit and loss account, we are given the balance sheet, and we are given the prior year's key ratios. Then in part A we are always asked to calculate 5 ratios. In part B we are asked to look at the performance of the company in this year from the point of view of shareholders. And in part C, we have to do a small bit of working on the asset test ratio and the current ratio. So to start the question, first of all, we're going to have a look at part A, the ratios. The first ratio we're asked to work out is we're asked to calculate cash sales if the period of credit given to debtors is 1.5 months. So to do this, the first thing we really need to know is that cash sales, stuff we sell for cash and get the money straight away, plus credit sales, stuff we sell and we get the money at a later date, they make up our total sales. So we're asked to work out cash sales in part 1. Now we are given total sales in the question. If I go back to the question, I can see the total sales are 960,000. So I can put in 960,000 for total sales. Credit sales I can work out from the information I'm given because it tells us that the period of credit given to debtors is 1.5 months. So I can work out credit sales and then the difference will be cash sales. So the period of credit given to debtors. The formula for the period of credit given to debtors is here in blue. It's debtors over credit sales multiplied by 12 because there's 12 months is equal to 1.5, it tells us in the question. So if I cross multiply here, 1.5 times my credit sales will be equal to 12 times debtors. So 1.5 times credit sales is equal to 12 times debtors. Now, similarly with maths, when you cross multiplier, if you want to get a value on its own, here I want to get credit sales on its own, so I want to get rid of the 1.5 on top. So to do that, I'm going to divide by 1.5 on this side of the equals, but I have to divide by 1.5 on this side of the equals, I have to do the same on the far side. So now the 1.5's cancel, and I'm left with credit sales is equal to 12 times debtors, and from the question, I can see the debtors are 78,000. I'm getting the 78,000 from the question here in my balance sheet. Debtors are 78,000, and that is divided by 1.5. So my credit sales works out to be 12 times 78,000, and then divide that by 1.5, which works out to be 624,000. So now my credit sales I've worked out to be 624,000. So my cash sales must be the difference between the two. So total sales minus credit sales, leaving me with cash sales of 336,000. And that is part 1 done. We were asked to work out cash sales and they're 336,000. The second ratio we are asked is to calculate the dividend yield. Well, the formula for dividend yield is dividend per share over market price per share multiplied by 100. Now, the market price per share is easy because we're given it in the question. The market price per share at the bottom of the balance sheet is €1.35 or 135 cents. We're better off dealing in cent here the whole time because usually these answers are given in cent, dividend per share and earnings per share. So we're better off putting everything in cent so we don't mix them up with euros at any stage. Now, the dividend per share is a separate ratio we need to calculate on its own. So over here, we're going to work out the dividend per share. Now, the formula for dividend per share is ordinary dividend over number of ordinary shares. Now, the number of ordinary shares is easy. We're going to just get that from the balance sheet. The number of ordinary shares are 500,000. And the ordinary dividend, we need to work that out. So to work out our dividends, and in every question, we'll always need to split out our dividends. Because in the question, in the P&L, we are given total dividends. But we never actually use this total dividends figure. Here we're getting, for this question, dividends is 55,000, total dividends. We never use the 55,000. We have to split it up between ordinary dividend and preference dividend. And they're the two figures we use in different ratios. So the total dividend we saw was 55,000. We can work out the preference dividend because if we go down to the balance sheet, it tells us that their 8% preference share is 250,000. So the preference dividend is 250,000 by 8%, which is 20,000, which means that the ordinary dividend is the difference between the two of them. The ordinary dividend must be 35,000 because the ordinary and the preference make up the total dividend. So for this ratio, it's the ordinary dividend we're looking for. So it's going to be ordinary dividend, which I'm after working out to be 35,000 over 500,000. So 35,000 divided by 500,000 is 0.07 euro. And then just to put that into cent, I'm just going to multiply it by 100, which is 7 cents. So the dividend per share works out to be 7 cents. So now to calculate our dividend yield, it's dividend per share, which is 7, over the market price per share, which is 135 cents, and then multiply it by 100 because our answer is in a percentage. So it's 7 divided by 135 multiplied by 100 gives a dividend yield of 5.19, the 2 decimal places, because in the question it asks us to work out the ratio, the 2 decimal places where appropriate. And that is ratio number 2 done, the dividend yield. The third ratio we're asked to calculate is dividend cover. Now the formula for the dividend cover ratio is net profit minus preference dividend over ordinary dividend. So the net profit I'm going to get from the question. I can see the net profit from the question here. Net profit is 90,000. So it's going to be 90,000. And I'm going to take away my preference dividend, which I've worked out above here. My preference dividend is 20,000. And that's going to be over my ordinary dividend, which I have also calculated up here, 35,000. And that's why it's so important to split out those dividends correctly. So this is going to be 90 minus 20 divided by 35. So the dividend cover works out to be 2 times evenly. The next ratio you're asked to calculate is return on capital employed. So the formula for return on capital employed is net profit before interest over capital employed multiplied by 100. Now, if we go back to the question, the net profit is 90,000, but that is after interest of 15,000 is taken away. So the net profit before interest will be 90 plus the 15. So it's 90,000 plus 15,000, and that's usually the way it is, but sometimes you don't have to add back the interest because it already is before interest in some of the years, so you just have to be careful. And we're putting that over the capital employed, and the capital employed is just the total of my balance sheet, 1087000, and multiply that by 100 because our answer is in percentage. So it's going to be 90 plus 15 divided by 1087000, which works out to be, and that should be the 2 decimal places is 9.66%. And the last ratio we're asked to calculate is the price earnings ratio. So the price earnings ratio is market price per share over earnings per share. Now again, the market price per share we are given in the question. It's easy, it's €1.35 or 135 cents. And we have to put that over the earnings per share. Now unfortunately the earnings per share again is a separate ratio we need to calculate. So to work out the earnings ratio, earnings per share ratio, it's net profit less interest less preference dividend over the number of ordinary shares. So if I go back to my P&L, it's net profit less interest less preference dividend. This net profit of 90,000 is less interest already, so I don't need to take that away again. So that 90,000 is less interest, so I just need to take away my preference dividend. So it's 90,000 less my preference dividend, and again I have the preference dividend calculated up here. It's 20,000. And we're going to divide that by the number of ordinary shares, and again in the balance sheet I can see the number of ordinary shares is 500,000. So the earnings per share works out to be 0.14 euro, and to change that to cent, again I'm just going to multiply it by 100, so it's 14 cent. The earnings per share is 14 cent. So now to calculate my price earnings ratio, it's my market price per share of 135 cent over my earnings per share of 14 cent, and that gives me 9.64 years, the 2 decimal places. So that is part A, our ratios calculated. Part B of the question asks us, indicate that the ordinary shareholders will be satisfied with the performance, state of affairs and prospects of the company. Use relevant ratios and other information to support your answer. So we're looking from the point of view of shareholders. I've already done a solution to the 2017 question, which is from the point of view of the bank. Now they're very similar, the answers will be very similar. The first 5 ratios, the first 5 headings we're going to use are the same, and the 6th heading will be different. For the bank, the 6th heading was security, whereas for shareholders, the 6th heading is share price. So again, the first 5 are going to be the same, and the more standardized your answer becomes, the better you will get at answering these. So I will always start off with profitability. Okay, for profitability, the ratio that we're concerned with is the return on capital employed. That's the main ratio we'll be concerned with. We already have this calculated in part A, but you might not always, so we'll just do it again here quickly. So what I'm looking for is the net profit before interest over capital employed multiplied by 100. So the net profit of 90,000 here is after interest, so the net profit before interest will be 90 plus 15 over the capital employed, which is the total of the balance sheet. So it's 90,000 plus 15,000 over the capital employed, which is the total of my balance sheet, which again I can see here is the 1087000. And I'm going to multiply that by 100 because my answer is a percentage. And that works out to be 10%. Okay, so return on capital employed, and again I should probably just do that to 2 decimal places, which is 9.66%. So the profitability of the company is 9.66%. To say in or around 10% is seen as good. You know, over 10% I reckon would be good, under 10% not as good. Again, different people will be happy with different percentages, so it's important to look at other stuff also. Well, the first thing anyway is the company is profitable because it's return of around 10%, so it's profitable. Now we're going to compare it, when we do the profitability, we need to compare to 3 things. Last year to see is it gone up or down. We need to compare it to the return from risk-free investments such as banks, building societies and credit unions of around 2 to 3%, and we need to compare it to the percentage of borrowing on debentures. And again, these are just notes I use to guide me when I'm answering this question. So the company is profitable. There's a return of 9.66%. The return on capital employed has improved from 5.8 in the previous year. So if I go back here to the previous year, my return on capital employed is 5.8. So it has improved from 5.8 in 2017 to 9.68 in 2018, which is a positive trend. And again, if it had gone down, you just say it is a negative trend. The company has made more efficient use of resources than the previous year because it's gone up. Again, if it went down, you would say the company has made less efficient use of resources. The return of 9.66% is well above the return from risk-free investments of 2 to 3%. So if you invest your money in a bank or building society or credit union, you get a rate of interest of around 2%. They all vary. If you invest your money in a company, you'd expect a greater return because there's more risk involved, and we have that greater return. It's also above the company's cost of borrowing of 6%. So here the cost of borrowing on debentures is 6%. If you're borrowing money and paying interest at 6%, you'd want to maybe making a return greater than that to make it worthwhile borrowing the money, and we're doing that. So because the company is profitable, it shouldn't have any problem paying dividends to shareholders, so the shareholders will be happy. And that is profitability looked at. The second heading we'll always look at is liquidity. So for liquidity, the most important ratio is the acid test ratio. If it's above 1:1, the company has no liquidity problems. If it's less than 1:1, the company has liquidity problems. And liquidity is probably one of the most important things because if they have liquidity problems, they won't have any cash to operate in the short term, which will not be good. So to calculate the asset test ratio, I'm going to start off with my current assets, which in the question, current assets are 150,000. And I'm going to take away my closing stock, which I will get from my P&L of 60,000. So it's going to be current assets of 150 minus closing stock of 60. And the reason to take away closing stock for the asset test ratio is that sometimes the closing stock is not easily converted into cash, so it's better to take it away when comparing. And we're comparing that to current liabilities, and the current liabilities, there's only one current liability here, because trade creditors 84,000. So what I'm comparing is 150 minus 60. I'm comparing 90,000 to 84,000. So that's going to be 90 divided by 84. It's going to be 1.07 is to 1, which is above 1 is to 1, which is acceptable. Now, what was the asset test ratio last year? So the asset test, or the quick ratio as it's sometimes called, was 0.86 last year. So last year they had liquidity problems, this year don't. So the asset test ratio has improved from 0.86 to 1 in 2017 to 1.07 is to 1 in 2018. This is a positive trend and will please shareholders. If it had went down or if there was still less than 1 to 1, it would be negative and shareholders would not be happy. The company does not have a liquidity problem at the moment. Again, this is a standard sentence. The company has €1.07 available in liquid assets for every €1 owed in the short term. If it was 0.8 is to 1, they would have 80 cents available in liquid assets for every €1 owed in the short term. A sentence always has to go in. The company should have no difficulty paying short-term debts as they fall due because liquidity is over 1 to 1. They shouldn't have any problem paying short-term debts as they fall due. And they should have no problem paying dividends to shareholders as they don't have liquidity problems. If they did have a liquidity problem, they would have problem paying dividends to shareholders, which would not please shareholders. So that is liquidity looked at. And again, over here, if you want to pause the video, you can. These are just some questions I use to guide us. Sometimes if they have a liquidity problem, you might say it's possibly due to overtrading. We don't know whether it is or not, but it sounds good just to put that in if there are liquidity problems. The third heading we're always going to look at is gearing. So for the gearing, there's two ratios we're going to look at, the gearing ratio and the interest cover. So gearing is how much debt there is in the company. So basically, the bottom of the balance sheet here is made up of 4 figures, 250, 500, 250 and 87. Of those 4 figures, of those 4 figures, 2 are seen as debt, the debentures, they're loans, and preference shares, they're treated like loans from shareholders. They're different than ordinary shares. So of the total of the balance sheet, debentures and preference shares are seen as debt, and the ordinary shares and the profit and loss balance are seen as equity. They're good. They're money that we got from shareholders and our profits coming forward. So basically, we want to see how much of this total figure is made up of debt. That's what gearing is. And if it's over 50%, it's highly geared, and under 50% is lowly geared. So we're getting our debentures and our preference shares, the 250 and the 250, and we're putting that over to 1087. So my debentures are 250,000. My preference shares are 250,000, and we're putting that over 107000. And again, I'll be multiplying it by 100 because my answer is in percentage. So 250 plus 250 divided by 1087 multiplied by 100, and that equals 46%. Okay, so it's under 50%, so the company is lowly geared. And we'll just calculate interest cover here now. So interest cover is profit before interest over interest. So again, if I go back to my P&L, I'll see that my profit is 90,000, but that's after the interest is taken away. So my profit before interest will be 90 plus 15 over the interest, which is 15. So 90,000 plus 15,000 over 15,000. And the interest cover is 7 times exactly. So the comment on this, first of all, we're going to comment on the first ratio, the gearing ratio. So the company is lowly geared, it's less than 50%. Last year it was highly geared. So if we go back to last year, we can see our gearing was 56%. So it's gone down, which is good. The gearing position has improved from 56% in 2017 to 46% in 2018. Because it's gone down, the company is less at risk from outside investors. If it went up, we would say the company was more at risk from outside investors. The business will be financed on a long-term basis more by equity than by debt. If it was highly geared, it would be financed on a long-term basis more by debt than by equity. But because it's lowly geared, it's more by equity than by debt. And just on the interest cover then, the interest cover has improved from 4.3 times to 7 times. So last year, interest cover was 4.3. We're after working out this year's is 7. And the higher the interest cover, the better. Means the more times profit we have than interest we have to pay. So again, the company shouldn't have any problem paying back the interest to the bank or the venture holders, and also they shouldn't have any problem paying back dividends to shareholders. Dividend policy. So this is always going to be our fourth heading. And while this is important for the venture holders and banks, it's very important from the point of view of shareholders, because shareholders will want to know what the dividend policy of the company is. So when I am answering this question, I always go to this little table here quickly. And when you have this table done out, it's very easy to comment on dividends. And it looks like there's a lot of going on in this table, or it'll take a long time to do, but it actually won't. So to work out last year's. So first of all, I'm going to go back to last year's figures here. And I need to get my earnings per share, which is 10 cents, and my dividends per share, which is 5 cents. So last year, earnings per share was 10 cents, dividends per share was 5 cents. So to get my payout, it's just going to be my dividends per share, which is 5, over my earnings per share, which is 10, and then I'm going to multiply it by 100 to work it as a percentage. So 50%. So last year, of the earnings, 50% or half of them were paid out to shareholders in dividends. I'm going to work on my dividend cover, which is simply my earnings per share over my dividend per share, which is 2. And I think we were given that last year. We were given the dividend cover was 2 times, so we're not always given it, so we need to know how to work it out. So it's just earnings per share over dividend per share. And my dividend yield is the last thing. So my dividend yield is just my dividend per share. So for the first 4 ratios, I've really only used earnings per share and dividend per share. For the dividend yield, again, it's going to be my dividend per share of 5, but this time I'm going to put it over my market price per share. Now, what was my market price per share last year? So last year it was 125, and this year it's 135. So I just put those in. Last year was 125, and this year is 135. Okay, so to work out my dividend yield, it's equal to my dividend per share, which is 5, divided by my market price per share, which is 125, multiplied by 100. So my dividend yield is 4%. Now, I have to get the same figures for this year. And while it looks like it could take a bit of time to work them out for this year, it's usually not too bad, because we have the earning. We nearly always have earnings per share and dividend per share worked out from part A of the question. If we're not specifically asked them, we might have needed to work them out for some other ratios. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back and look for earnings per share. So again, here I can say straight away that I needed to get my earnings per share to work out my price earnings ratio. So I have my earnings per share of 14 cents. My dividend per share, if I go back to my ratios, I needed to work out dividend yield, and for dividend yield, I needed to work out dividend per share. So again, I have my dividend per share worked out, which is 7. So that will save us a lot of time working those out again. So my payout now is going to be equal to, again, my dividend per share over my market price per share, multiplied by 100, which is the exact same as the previous year of 50%, which is unusual enough. My dividend cover is going to be earnings per share over dividend per share, which is 2 times exactly, the same as the previous year. And my dividend yield is going to be my dividend per share, which is 7, divided by my market price per share, 135, multiplied by 100 is 5.19%. So now we have all these figures, it's just a matter of commenting on them. Usually, as a rule of thumb, what they say is that 50% of the money should be kept in the company and 50% may be paid out to shareholders. So if it was much less than 50%, shareholders would not be happy because they wouldn't be getting the return they wanted. If it was a lot higher than 50%, while it might look good for shareholders, For the long-term stability of the company, it wouldn't be good, and in the long run, that would affect shareholders and share price, so they wouldn't want too high of a return either. So around 50% seems good. Okay, so the comment on this, both earnings per share and dividend per share has improved from the previous year. So they've both gone up from the previous year. In 2017 and 2018, the company paid 50% of their profits and dividends. The payout was 50%. The shareholders will be happy as they are getting an adequate return while also keeping some of the profits in the company to pay loan interest. So they're getting a return of 50%, which is good, but also some of the money is being kept in the company to pay loan interest and other expenses that need to be paid. The dividend cover has remained 2 times for both years, no change there. And the dividend yield has improved from 4% in 2017 to 5.19% in 2018. And we compare this to the return from risk-free investments, so it's greater than the return from risk-free investments of 2 to 3%. So overall, the shareholders will be happy with the dividend policy. The fifth heading we look at is sector. So first sector, we don't need to work out any ratios, we just need to comment on the sector that the company are in. And again, we don't need a massive in-depth knowledge of the sector, we just need to make a few relevant points. So what sector are they in? We're looking at the final accounts of Shannon plc, a company involved in renewable energy industry. Okay, so Shannon plc is in the renewable energy industry. So usually for sector, you talk about what the prospects for the company be like in the short term and the long term. So in the short term, it's a good industry to be in, as there's a growing industry and people are becoming more environmentally aware. Households can now receive grants for the installation of solar panels, and all houses are trying to become more energy efficient the whole time. Long-term prospects are even more encouraging as oil supplies are anticipated to be depleted in approximately 45 years. Unless people are using oil, more people are going to renewable energy. People are actively looking to employ renewable sources of energy. You know, with a lot of houses now are getting in air to water and solar panels and stuff. And however, though, the sector may become under pressure from competition from abroad. So this is a kind of standard sentence you can nearly always put in for most industries. They're probably becoming under pressure from competition from abroad. And maybe, depending on the industry, you might say at the moment, well, obviously with the current situation with the coronavirus might affect businesses, and also prior to that, Brexit was another problem that might have hit some industries. So you could also talk about those in your answer if you wanted. Share price is the last heading. So the first 5 headings were always going to be the same, no matter whether we're looking from the point of view of the bench shareholders, banks, or shareholders. Now, if we're talking from the bench shareholders or banks, our 6th heading is going to be security, whereas for shareholders, our 6th heading is going to be share price. So the first thing we're just going to do is compare the market value of an ordinary share. So as we said already, in this year the market value is €1.35 or 135 cents, and in the previous year it was €1.25 or 125 cents. I should put them in euros here because we'll just look at them to compare. The second thing we're going to work out is the price earnings ratio, which is just the market price per share over the earnings per share. So, and we already have it worked out in part A for this one. It was the 5th ratio we worked out in part A, but we'll do it again here quickly. So the market price per share is €1.35 or 135 cents, and I'm just going to divide that by the earnings per share, which I have up here already for the previous year of 14, which gives me 9.64 years, and that's what we already had in part A. And for the previous year, again, it's going to be the market price per share, which is 125 cents, divided by the earnings per share for 2017, which I have up here, 10 cents. So it'll be 12.5 years. So to comment on these, the share price has risen from €1.25 in 2017 to €1.35 in 2018, and this trend is likely to continue based on this year's performance, because the profitability has gone up, the share price will most likely go up. So this is a positive trend. Okay, if it went down, it would be a negative trend. This would please shareholders as it indicates stock market confidence in the company. Obviously, if it had went down from the previous year, the shareholders would not be happy, as it would not indicate stock market confidence in the company. So based on the current earnings, based on current earnings, the time it takes to recover its value is 9.6 years, which is an improvement from 2017 when it would have taken 12.5 years to get their money back. So it's taken less time for them to get their money back, which is good. This means they will take a shorter time for shareholders to recover their investment. So the shareholders will be happy on this. Now, sometimes an extra heading I put in is investment policy. When you talk about from the point of view of shareholders, they have an investment policy heading, so it's no harm to throw it in. If you're talking from the point of view of the venture holders or bank, you'll already have commented on the investment policy when you talk about securities. So we'll just put it in here for shareholders. And again, it's very easy. All we have to do is go to a balance sheet and look at our investments. So the cost 210,000, the market value is 250,000, so they've gone up by 40,000. Obviously, if the market value is less than what you bought them for, it wouldn't be good. But this is good, it's improved by 40,000. So simply we're just going to say investment which cost 210,000, now with a market value of 250,000, which represents an increase of 40,000, which is a 19% increase. This represents an efficient use of resources by management and would please shareholders. Obviously, if it went down, it wouldn't be efficient use of resources and it would not please shareholders. And then just a sentence or two to conclude, to wrap up our answer. Shareholders will be very satisfied with the performance, state of affairs and prospects of the company as it is profitable. Profitability has been up. It's around 10%, it's improved from last year. There's no liquidity problems, over 1:1. It's lowly geared, it's less than 50%, and the market price has increased from the previous year, which is also good. When some people are answering these questions about the performance, state of affairs and prospects, they might change the way they answered. They might put them profitability and dividends under performance heading, liquidity, gearing and investment under state of affairs, and sector and market value of shares under prospects. If you got really good at answering these questions, maybe you could do it this way, put them in this order. But for the moment, I'd probably just try and make it as standardized as possible, do the same headings in the same order all the time till you get really good at them. That is part B of the question answered. So part C of the question says, Shannon PLC is considering acquiring a solar panel company, Ceret Limited, in 2019. Ceret Limited has supplied the following balance sheet information for the end of 2018. Based on the information given in the table above, in the above table, calculate the current ratio for Ceret, calculate the asset test ratio for Ceret, and then using the calculated figures, explain why it's important for Shannon PLC to analyse the liquidity position of Ceret. Okay, so the first ratio we're asked to calculate is the current ratio. So the current ratio is current assets is the current liabilities. So we're given 6 figures here, so we need to split them up into which are current assets and which are current liabilities, or liabilities less than 1 year. So closing stock is an asset. Creditors is a liability, people we owe. Debtors is an asset, people that owe us money. Expenses accrued are expenses due, which is bad, it's a liability. Expenses prepaid are good, they're an asset. And bank overdraft, because an overdraft is bad, it's a liability. So my current asset is going to be closing stock of 47, debtors 39, and expenses prepaid of 13. So 47, 39, and 13. And our liabilities are going to be 45 creditors, expenses due of 15, and bank overdraft of 16,500. So 45, 15, and 16,500. Which is 76,500. So to work that out, it's going to be 99 divided by 76,500 is 1.29 is to 1. My asset test or quick ratio is very similar to my current ratio, only though from current assets I take away closing stock. And we already have it worked out in part B for Shannon PLC itself, but now we're going to do it for Ceret. So the current assets are 99,000. I've worked that out here. The current assets are 99,000. I just have to take away the closing stock, which I can see from the question of Generate is 47,000. And I'm going to compare that to the current liabilities, which again is the same as above. So now, after I take away my closing stock, I get 52,000, and I'm going to compare that to 76,500, which works out to be 0.68 is to 1. So the current ratio is 1.29 is to 1, and that's below the ideal of 2 is to 1. So the current ratio should be above 2 is to 1, and the acid test ratio should be above 1 is to 1. So the current ratio is 1.29 is to 1, which is below the ideal of 2 is to 1, and the acid test ratio is 0.68 to 1, which again is below the ideal of 1 is to 1. So Generate is not liquid, which is very serious, as the company that is not liquid may be forced into bankruptcy. Therefore, Shannon plc will want to know, can the company take any positive action to improve its liquidity position? The poor liquidity of Generate could be a significant factor in whether Shannon plc to buy the company or not. So as the current ratio and acid test ratio are below the ideal, the company will be very sceptical about acquiring Generate, as they have liquidity problems. That is the end of the 2019 ratios question. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, would you please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.